There are a couple of new pieces of information, too, about the flights in question that we have been so focused on today. In the case of American Flight 11, this was the one that first crashed into the trade towers this morning at 8:48, just a little before 9 o'clock this morning. ABC's Lisa Stark, who covers aviation for us, now says that a flight attendant called from the plane to say that 2 flight attendants had been stabbed, and people on board the aircraft had broken into the flight deck, into where the captain and the co-pilot, and in the case of the 767, can't recall, they're not an engineer, but certainly broken into the cockpit, where the pilot and the co-pilot were located. 2 hostages, two flight attendants stabbed. And in the case of United Airlines Flight 737, which was the aircraft the United Airlines was crashed just near Pittsburgh, Lisa does confirm for us our reporting of a little while ago that a passenger did call from a cell phone on the phone to an emergency service, a 911 emergency service. They managed to do from the air to say that, in fact, they were in the process of being hijacked. And Ann Compton, one of our White House correspondents, calls just a short while ago to say that the president has landed again, this time at an Air Force base in Nebraska. And this suggests, A, that the Secret Service is still very much in charge of the president's movements at the moment, and that there is a very strong feeling in the highest reaches of government that the president should stay on the move. He's going to stay there, conceivably, for the next little while, because we've also been told by Ann that he's going to speak to the National Security Council this afternoon on a teleconference. The president to stay abroad. I suppose you can do that from Air Force One as well. I'm not altogether sure. I think you probably can. But the president is going to talk to the National Security Council from somewhere other than Washington, and he is now in Nebraska. As I think Terry Moran, our White House correspondent, and others mentioned very early on in the day, it's a very delicate line for the president to follow. Stay on the move, lest there be any security threat to the president, and this will be absolutely decided by the national leadership of the Secret Service in conjunction with the National Security Council, while the political operatives in the president's entourage very much want him, we're told by Claire Shipman and others, to get him back to Washington to be in control in the place which is familiar to most Americans. And Mrs. Bush is, of course, we've already said, is at an undisclosed location, and Vice President Cheney, who carries an enormous load in this particular administration, is currently working out of the White House. John McCarthy, who covers the Pentagon, national security, and a good deal of terrorism and international intelligence issues for us, is at the Pentagon. John, what have you got?
A whole plate full of things, Peter. First of all, we've been talking throughout the day about possible ship movements, American ship movements. It is true that 2 aircraft carriers, 5 other combatants, and a hospital ship are now all heading north along the Atlantic seaboard toward New York. No decision has yet been made about exactly what to do with those ships when they get there, but of course aircraft carriers have a very large hospital capability, so they could be used for that. I think it is a responsive measure. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, after the attack on the Pentagon, went immediately to the gash that you see behind me here when the very first destruction was detected and helped pull some people out of the rubble. He is now in what is called the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon, and he intends to stay there indefinitely until all forces around the world have been secured. All forces around the globe at this point are at ThreatCon Delta, which is the highest level of threat condition that American troops can be in. One of the difficulties with the fire and the rescue effort here in the Pentagon, Peter, is we have seen continuous outbreaks of fires within the different levels of the Pentagon, and it has been extremely difficult for search and rescue people to get inside the Pentagon. It was 5 hours before the first people were able to get into some of the rubble to try to begin to pull out people who may have been trapped. The fire in the Pentagon was described as an inferno by those people who were in some of the worst areas. The evacuation in parts of the Pentagon was very orderly. Some of it was complete chaos, as you might expect.
Okay, John, thanks very much. John McCarthy at the Pentagon. We just take a quick look at John there. Jackie, you there for a second? I want to put John on camera for a second, because earlier today you described, you just turn around and take a look at that gash in the Pentagon there, and describe again for us. You think it's what, 200 feet wide, 200 to 300 feet wide?
It is at least 200 or 300 feet wide, Peter. Just imagine a very large commercial aircraft ramming into this space. The Pentagon is built like a blockhouse, as you know, during World War II. It is a very substantial building, and this aircraft, traveling at between 150 and 200 miles an hour, penetrated deeply into the rings of the Pentagon, almost to the center. The destruction on the 5 floors that are above ground is considerable. One of the admirals was briefing us earlier that he felt that the section that was hit was one of the areas that was being repaired. We now believe that is not true. It is an area that was very fully staffed, primarily with Navy and Marine Corps personnel, but also the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Okay, thanks very much, John McCarthy at the Pentagon. We'll come back to you on the